Hello and welcome back to Nixology. Last time we looked through a quick intro to the Nixpkgs repository and how to kind of interact with that and get a general sense of how it's structured and how it works. So this time we're going to talk a little bit about the Nix standard library and then I guess what you might call the extended standard library that lives in Nixpkgs. So first off, Nix has some operators, just like any language. We'll have like plus, minus, multiply, divide, stuff like this. If I search for Nix operators, I'll see this page in the Nix manual called operators, and we have really a handful. So there's the stuff you recognize like equals and or a few slightly weird things like double slash to merge multiple attribute sets. And then a fairly kind of idiosyncratic question mark one about list concatenation. So this is like the real basic core of the language. There's also a bunch of built-in functions. So within this same manual, it actually might be a different manual. Let's see. Yeah, section 15.5, built-in functions. There's also this small collection of built-in functions. So here you'll see things like builtins.concat strings sep. So you can concat multiple strings together with a separator. So for example, if I do builtins.concat strings sep space, let's do colon, and A, B, C, I get what you'd expect. So there's a few of these. There's stuff about interacting with the basic types like attribute sets and lists, a few for doing kind of more Nix specific things like fetching URLs into the Nix store, fetching Git repositories. What do we have here? Going to and from JSON, getting environment variables, which works in some cases. Stuff about checking whether things are certain types. But really, there's not actually a whole lot of stuff here. It's this built-ins namespace you're not going to find is as complete as, say, like Ruby's enumerable library. It leaves a lot of things out. So in pretty much any sufficiently advanced Nix code base, you're going to get a whole bunch of extra stuff that gets added in, and in Nixpkgs this happens in the lib directory. So this, everything in the lib directory gets put into Nixpkgs under the namespace lib. So if I do nixrepl and I load Nixpkgs and then I look at lib, I'll see all this stuff. Now, it's actually, we'll talk for just briefly about what you're actually seeing here. For each of these, lib is a big attribute set, just like things tend to be in Nix, with a whole bunch of names. The names are function names. For example, if I would do, here I've got unique list highlighted. If I would do lib.uniqueList, I see this. And this is, this means it's a function. Called a lambda. Lambda basically means anonymous function. But then we de-anonymize it by binding it to the name unique list, but that's not inherent to the definition of the function. And it knows where it's defined and on what line and column. So if we would open that up, we could go see line 91 and we'd see unique list. Now this is in, you can see right here, nixpkgs/lib/deprecated.nix. So okay, don't use this one, but still you can see the definition. Takes an input list and some accumulator, I guess, and then based on the name, I guess we can infer that it's like deduplicating elements in the list. But rather than looking at a deprecated function, let's look at other ones. This lib directory is basically broken down by type for the most part. Or at least this is the useful way to start interacting with it. You have functions relating to lists functions relating to attribute sets, functions relating to strings. So let's first look at attr sets. Well, let's look at lists. So here we have a function which takes lib, which is itself. Don't worry about if that confuses you. Just try to move past that. Don't get confused. We do some stuff, and then ultimately there's this big attribute set, starts on line 8 and goes all the way to line 675. And within here, all you have is a whole bunch of different definitions. So for example, singleton is a function on lib, takes something and returns that thing in an array. So we can run that. Nix REPL, and we should just be able to do, well, let's just do load Nixpkgs, and then do lib.singleton of 3. Sure. So there's, as far as I know, there's not a great place to like go read this documentation in a sort of like API documentation format. Typically what you want to do is just pop open Nixpkgs and look for the type that you think the function's on, and you can grep through it. So for example, if you were like, well, I want some way to, I don't know, like just get the names of the attributes from an attribute set, you would dev cd Nixpkgs after you had cloned it. You would cd into lib, and you would just like rip grep, I don't know, names. And you'll see a whole bunch of crap. You'll eventually find, attr names. That looks right. So, I mean, it takes some spelunking to initially get acquainted with this. But attr names. So it turns out attr names is from built-ins, but yeah, it's not even defined here. So attr names is in a built-in. So we can go see the documentation for that here. Attr names, yeah. So returns the names of the attributes in the set in an alphabetically sorted list. So fine. But there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. I don't have any really great tips on interacting with this other than just understand that it all lives under lib. And there's a whole bunch of useful functions in here. And pretty much all of the Nix code you'll write will have access to Nixpkgs, so you can essentially always rely on this. You just have to kind of be aware of when code is on the built-ins namespace versus when it's on lib. In NixOS or Runix style modules, I'm going to be talking about Runix more in a few videos probably, but you'll typically have things that look like, let's see, I'll just open Ruby Wang. A module is essentially always a function which is passed config, packages, and lib being really just that standard library from Nixpkgs. And the first thing you'll typically do in any of these modules is to say with lib. Just what with does is every name in that namespace, it just dumps it into your local namespace. So for example, make option is a thing that's really core to the way NixOS modules and therefore Runix modules work. And that make option is defined in lib options. So this is just function number 2 here. It takes a whole bunch of parameters. You can see this. This options file defines a few other things, but yeah, basically lib is always available, contains a lot of functions. It's a pretty important thing to understand to effectively write Nix code, at least how to interact with this, because it can be pretty mystifying seeing all these lib dot whatever and not really getting that it's just a directory in Nixpkgs that is used everywhere. So yeah, that's it for now. I don't think there's anything in specific I should talk about here. There's just a whole bunch of functions and there's no natural next thing to talk about. So We'll probably move on to something other than Nixpkgs next time. And we'll see what that is when I get there.